thank you both to Marilyn and to Andrew. You've heard everything that's going on, but between a year and 18 months ago, virtually none of this was happening. The thing had got kind of stagnated, really, and it wasn't moving forward. They came in, I mean, I think when you sort of took over, there was 34 cities. Now, 22, and more coming in 222, more coming in every day. And that's due to, there they are working away in this skeleton team on, as you heard, on minuscule finances. So really, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done to make this thing happen. And it's a great joy to me to have Amin here today. He was with us from the very beginning when we wrote the charter together in Geneva, and he's doing magnificent work in Pakistan, right on the cusp, on the front line of so many of the conflicts that are tearing our world apart. And it's that vision of a world in conflict and pain that drove me to ask for the charter when I won the TED Prize. Because it had long been a source of absolute frustration to me as a historian of religion, that though every single one of the major world religions has independently created its own version of the Golden Rule and said that, and not a doctrine or a sexual ethic or a particular orthodoxy, is the centre of faith, the litmus test of true spirituality. And yet, you rarely heard about it. When religious leaders come together, they're usually holding forth about some kind of doctrine or other, something inessential. But the Golden Rule requires us never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself. Requires us to look into our hearts, discover what gives us pain, and then refuse under any circumstance whatsoever to inflict that pain on anybody else. Never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself. And unless now, it seems to me, that we implement the Golden Rule globally, so that we ensure that all peoples, whoever they are treated in the way that we would wish to be treated ourselves, the world will not be a viable place. You see what's just happening in the Middle East. And if we British had behaved in a different way in our colonies, I'm sure we wouldn't be having so many political problems today. And so these conflicts that we're seeing in distant parts of the world, they're not just their problems, or why can't they get it together after all this time. There are problems too, because not only are we interconnected as never before, economically, financially, all the markets are profoundly interconnected, but our histories are profoundly intertwined, and we help to create one another for good and for ill. And so Andrew asked me on one conference call, what should a compassionate city be like? And I said it should be an uncomfortable city. Profoundly uncomfortable because of the pain in the world. Even though we live in a relatively safe city here, a city of enormous privilege, that puts us, that privilege comes with responsibility. We have somehow to make a difference in the world. So I'm not interested in sentiment, peace and love and joy and feelings. Compassion isn't a feeling. Feelings come and go. They are influenced by your digestion, by how much sleep you had last night, by a number of different things. It can be overthrown in a moment in irritation. Moment's irritation. I was extremely irritated trying to find this place, I have to say, and arrived in not a very compassionate state of mind. So constantly, So feelings are not it. It just demands a principled effort, as Confucius said, all day and every day, to dethrone yourself from the center of your world and see things from somebody else's perspective. And you can do that in the workplace, with your families, but also spare a thought for the wider world. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that not one of you can be a believer if he can sleep when he knows that somebody is hungry. And we are deluged with images of pain and suffering on a global scale more than perhaps any previous generation. They're beamed into our homes every night on the evening news. Last night I was at an event and someone asked me about sort of terrorism and extremism. There's a surveys have been done on the young men who went to Afghanistan, first during the Soviet War, and then after the Soviet War to Bin Laden's camps. In-depth surveys of those who've been questioned or those who walked away from the camps. And the vast majority of those young men who went, and I think the same is true of what happened in Syria, went because of the spectacles they were seeing of Muslim pain all around the globe. In Palestine, Chechnya, and Lebanon, coming into the luxurious homes of Saudi Arabia. They were shattered, and the Quran says, you must help your brothers and sisters. It's exactly the same impulse that impelled young men during the Spanish Civil War to give up everything and perhaps even lose their lives in an attempt to help prevail, as they thought, against injustice and wrong. And it's exactly what happened in 1967 at the beginning of the Six-Day War, when Jews from all over the diaspora left home and congregated in India. This is a good feeling. Of course, once they're there, they can get all swept up in a whole lot of other issues and with unscrupulous people. But we must have this consciousness too, a sense of disquiet, that there's a huge imbalance of wealth and power in the world that has resulted in extreme alienation and poverty. Poverty does not usually drive people to extremism. What does that is humiliation. Humiliation on a cultural and personal scale. And that is something that we have to engage with as people who've helped to make people feel humiliated over the decades. Now, so as you are making your own cities or workplaces, places of compassion, remember that world outside. The Buddha, it said that when he was a child, the local priests told his fortune, and they told his father that he would see 4 very upsetting things that would impel him to leave home and become a monk, and he would become a Buddha, an enlightened man. And the Buddha's father was not thrilled at this career prospect, so he immured him, the legend goes, in a pleasure palace. Had every conceivable luxury, and he posted guards around the grounds to keep any distressing spectacle at bay. And the Buddha lived in this fool's paradise for 29 years until the gods took a hand and said, this man is destined to be a Buddha. So they sent 4 of his number, of their own number, 4 gods, into the garden, past the guards, disguised as a sick man, an old man, a corpse, and a monk. And the Buddha was so shattered by this unexpected suffering, he left home that very night. in the Sanskrit traditions, the word karuna, for compassion, it means to take responsibility for the pain of the world and to work practically to assuage it in whatever way you can. And the Buddha would send his monks out not to sit under a tree meditating and luxuriating in a nice, warm, spiritual glow, but to work, for, as he said, for the welfare of human beings. And I often think that we in the West live in a kind of pleasure palace, a world of safety and privilege and power. Even in Britain we have a certain amount of power that people don't have in other parts of the world. And the Buddhism is an extremely psychological religion. It knows it. These yogins who pioneered the search for the internal world understood about the unconscious mind far long before Freud and Jung. And that image of the guards posted around the garden, the grounds, is a wonderful image of the mind in denial. We don't want to know about sufferings. We look at this, not another earthquake, or as someone in the movement kept saying to me, I've got compassion fatigue. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm sick of. But we have to see that, I think, as a spiritual, or in whatever way you like to see it, opportunity. When you see these disturbing sights on the television, let one stay with you throughout the day and create a seed of discomfort in your mind. And if some of you are in education or media or business indeed, politics certainly, keep the pain of the world in mind and make sure that we don't just listen to the lazy sound bites on the news, but understand that there's more greater complexity, and it's not just problems of people who are just too perverse to create the kind of decent conditions that we have ourselves. So keep that global discomfort in mind, because it is, I think, the sand in the oysters that creates the pearl. And it will stop the compassion movement becoming anything complacent or self-regarding or self-congratulatory or sentimental, that there's always something to be done. That we have the people who who enunciated the Golden Rule, people like the Buddha, Confucius, Mozi, Jesus, St. Paul, they all said you cannot confine your benevolence to your own group. You must have what one of the Chinese sages said, Yan Ai, that's Mozi, 5th century BCE, concern for everybody. And he said, and these people were, in China particularly, deeply political. Confucius wasn't just on some pleasant little quest. He tramped the great plain of China with his small band of disciples, constantly trying to engage the kings to take this seriously. Because, as Moses said, if we continue like this, they were just at the beginning of a terrible period in China called the Warring States period, where all the states of China fought one another until only one was left. And that became the empire after 200 years of slaughter, in which the people who died were mostly the ordinary people who were just in the fray of the fighting. Jesus, an intensely political figure as well as a spiritual one. Prophets of Israel insisted that it's not enough to say your prayers or engage in sort of pleasant exercises if you're not looking after the poor, the hungry, and the vulnerable. Prophet Muhammad, the whole of the Quran, is simply a cry for compassion, that it's wrong to build a private fortune selfishly, but good to share your wealth and create a just and decent society where people who are vulnerable are treated with respect. And this is what we have to do now in our global world as well as at home. So this is really a thrilling day for me. I remember on the day we launched the Charter in Washington, there was great excitement in Washington, and I was rushing from the whole day from one event to another event, and huge crowds, a huge Muslim gathering, great excitement at Georgetown University. At the end of the day, I wound up at the BBC. And you'll know that this guy's face, because you see him quite often. He looked at me as he came and said, well, this is a fairly loony project, isn't it? And I thought, home sweet home, here I am. But now here you are. This is thrilling, and I really look forward to working with you. I think if we can create, as we say, an office so that the UK becomes the centre of one of the great hubs of the Charter, working in conjunction with others, we can do something, even in this sceptical island. So thank you all for coming today. Have some really good discussions. This is just the beginning of a long journey together. Thank you very much.